Is social media causing climate change? Or is the title of this talk just clickbait for all of the viewers back home? The more specific question to ask would be, how is social media affecting our relationships with the natural world? In the technology's current form, I believe that social media is deeply harming the ways we relate with the earth around us. More precisely, I believe that social media stops us from having deliberate, intentional, embodied interactions with our immediate physical environments. To understand how this happens, we have to look at time. Time spent online and time spent in the natural world. It's no secret that we are spending more and 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 more time online. Recent reports on internet usage found that 92% of Americans use the internet, and that on average, we spend up to 24 hours a week online, with younger generations averaging 6 to 8 hours a day. These concerningly high figures are because our social media platforms are designed to be as entrancing as possible. Ding! I have a notification that's gonna give me a burst of dopamine. Let's see what it is. Unlock. Oh, it's my friend. He DM'd me a funny meme on Instagram. Respond. Might as well check my feed while I'm here. Scroll, like, scroll, like, scroll, like, comment. Scroll, like, scroll, watch. Like, refresh, 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 refresh. Does this action look familiar? It's me miming the action of pulling the lever on a slot machine. A comparison to social media many make to describe its seemingly addictive design, created by features like the endless scroll or the randomization of our feeds every time we refresh them. The pursuit of profit drives these spellbinding design choices, with the data generated from our online activity being sold by social media corporations to their clients, who then produce the highly targeted advertisements that flood our feeds. You know, that Facebook ad that popped up about that thing that you were literally just talking about. But time spent online comes at the cost of time spent outside. In another survey examining the relationships between Americans and nature, half of the almost 12,000 participants reported that they only spend up to 5 hours per week in nature, with digital technology identified as one of the main drivers behind this minuscule amount of time. The report also explored what Americans even consider to be nature, a word many participants reserved to describe the distant lands largely untouched by humans, but not their own backyards. But if we don't consider our towns and cities and other developed areas to be a part of the natural world, then we will continue to live in an existence in which we are completely separated from nature. Picture this. The summer after I graduated from high school, my family moved from within the city limits of Houston to the vast, sprawling outer suburbs. I had no connection to the new house, the new neighborhood that my family now called home, having spent barely any time there the summer before leaving for college, and only returning for the breaks during the school year. Time I spent holed up in my room on my social media accounts, tweeting my disdain for the kingdom of suburbia. In other words, out in the suburbs of Houston, I had absolutely no relationship with the environment around me. Instead of trying to value the new locale of my parents' home, I sought comfort in the digital world where every thought and feeling I had could be liked and validated. But this disconnect with the land of the suburbs put me on mindless autopilot whenever I stepped out of the door. Because of my lack of an emotional, a physical connection with Richmond, Texas, mentally, I was not in Richmond, Texas. Instead, I was on Twitter, catching up on what my friends from school were doing. I was on YouTube, watching recordings of concerts that I wished I was at. I was even on Facebook, just to distract myself from having to think about the overbearing Texas humidity right outside my door. This mindset, looking back, prevented me from fully appreciating the life around me in the deepest of senses. This changed a few months ago when I was down south, out in the kingdom of suburbia. I was driving back to my parents' home from my mother's office, listening to my phone navigate me on the 16-mile drive, when my device ran out of battery, leaving me in the middle of the suburbs with an outdated GPS in my car and a vague idea of my location. I was lost. Thankfully, I came across a familiar highway, allowing me to find my way back home. But as I was driving, carefully scanning the streets for any signs that would point me in the right direction, I began to notice things about the suburbs that I never once thought twice about. I noticed how many trees were lining the streets, how big and blue the Texas sky looked, how the seemingly identical suburban developments reminded me of ant colonies, of termite mounds. That moment was when I realized that, yes, even the suburbs of Houston, as constructed as they may be, are still built on our planet, are still a part of the grander system that is the natural world. The next day, I heard just how symphonic the neighborhood birds are in the morning. I saw just how many dragonflies dart above the pond by my parents' home. I think it's very telling that this shift in my worldview occurred only after my connection to the digital world was severed. Now, this talk isn't to say that social media is all bad news when it comes to the climate crisis. Just think about the surge of climate strikes and protests across the globe, largely organized on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Social media is, after all, a tool meant to help us connect, share, and learn. But in its current form, it consumes our waking lives. Because so much of our attention is spent in the digital world, we are failing more and more at thoughtfully engaging with our immediate physical environments, at fostering a tangible relationship with the nature right outside and even inside our homes. And if we don't have a relationship with our local natural surroundings, then how can we truly care for these environments? And if we don't care for the nature we live alongside, then how can we even begin to tackle the biggest challenges within the ecological crisis, like transforming our industrial global food system to one that is local and sustainable, or decarbonizing our energy economy in favor of green infrastructures and practices, or equitably distributing the world's resources from those at the top who hoard them to the Black, brown, and indigenous communities who need them most. I suspect that it all goes back to the siren song of our social media spaces. Digital prisons that we can no longer afford to be ensnared within. Instead, we need to change how these social media platforms are designed and decide if we want to let these apps trap us in the digital sphere of spam and likes and trolls and comments and hate and retweets and misinformation and external validation. Or we can design these platforms so that they actually encourage us to put our devices away. giving us time to take a deep breath. Time to go for a walk in our neighborhoods. Look at the leaves changing colors. Feel the wind on our skin. And cultivate an honest, open connection with the natural world that surrounds us. Thank you.